I know that Redmi hasn't made a huge impact in 2023, but the Redmi Note 13 Pro Plus is here and it hopes to change a few things around. There are upgrades in terms of the improved IP68 rating, Gorilla Glass Victus protection, the new design, and of course, the promise of HyperOS as well. But is that enough for Redmi to make an impact in 2024? Well, we'll find that out. If you're here for the first time, I'm Ershad. You're watching Trakin English, your destination for detailed, incisive gadget reviews. You know what my wife says? That I have an unhealthy obsession with phone aesthetics. But how can you not stare at the Redmi Note 13 Pro Plus? Look at how good it looks. It's easily one of the best looking Redmi phones ever made. In fact, one of the best looking sub 30k phones ever made. In fact, even my wife agrees. Essentially, the rear material on the Redmi Note 13 Pro Plus is vegan leather, and it follows somewhat of the neoplastic school of design, which is basically a bunch of colored rectangles stacked together on a purple canvas like this. It's very avant-garde for a mid-range phone if you ask me, and I really want Redmi to continue this design for their future phones as well, maybe just change around the colors a little bit. The symmetry of the design and the alignment, all of that is done so aesthetically pleasingly that I really like it. It appeals to the design nerd in me. There are two other colors available, Fusion Black and Fusion White, but I'd say don't even look at them if you're considering buying the phone. Just pick up the Fusion Purple, just looks very good. The phone is about 8.9 millimeters thick, but it blends into this very slim frame, so it doesn't feel 8.9 millimeters thick, and it weighs about 204 grams, but the weight distribution has been done really well, so the in-hand feel of the phone is actually very good. And since it has this vegan leather back, the grippiness is pretty good too. So you don't have to worry about the phones slipping out of your hand. Now, apart from the looks itself, Redmi doesn't skip out on any of the functional aspects of the design. You get a smattering of mics. You've got an infrared blaster at the top, which is something that Redmi always does. You've got a stereo speaker setup. You've got a SIM card tray, which accepts 2 nano SIM cards. And you've also got a volume rocker and a power button on the right edge. And at the bottom is your age-old, ancient USB Type-C 2.0 standard. I think all brands should just, make a pact to en masse move towards the USB 3.1 standard. We want faster USB speeds. But the new addition to the Redmi Note 13 Pro Plus is of course that IP68 rating, which makes it dust-proof and waterproof as well. This is not a first for a phone in this price category. The Moto H40 and the Moto H40 Neo both had IP68 rating. That's there on the Redmi Note 13 Pro Plus as well. But it's a good feature to have. Having said that, I'm curious, would you prefer IP rating in this price class, or would you actually prefer a more cleaner software experience? Alright, moving on to the display, the phone has a 6.67-inch curved OLED panel. It's a 1.5K resolution display with 120Hz refresh rate as well. It's one of the better panels that you can find in this price class for sure. Now, when I was checking out the phone, inside the display settings, you get an advanced settings option from where you can get a Pro mode for a display P3 color gamut or sRGB color gamut. So you can expect a really good color accuracy from the display as well. In fact, the tuning's done fairly well too, and I don't see any sort of color bias towards any spectrum. So that's a good thing. That's not it. Xiaomi, with all of its lineup of phones, not just the Redmi lineup, is the only brand that is religiously supporting the Dolby Vision format, which I really appreciate. So even on the Redmi Note 13 Pro Plus with Netflix, you do get Dolby Vision out of the box. Couple that with the panel reaching a peak brightness of 1800 nits when you're watching HDR content. Watching, Netflix shows and movies is actually a treat on this phone. But if you're wondering about the regular brightness when you're using the phone and, pushing the manual slider, then it reaches a typical max brightness of 500 nits, and in the automatic mode it can go up to 1200 nits, which is pretty good. By automatic, I mean when you take the phone outside and if the phone detects sunlight and it automatically increases the brightness. That's what I'm talking about. By the way, I have one more question for you guys. What do you guys think of this new trend of brands promoting the peak brightness on smartphones without actually mentioning that peak brightness actually works only in local 10% window or a certain stipulated window? I definitely want to know your nuanced thoughts on this whole peak brightness situation, and I'm reading all the comments, and whichever comment I like, I'll feature it in my next video that I'm shooting. By default, you've got a touch sampling rate of 240Hz, which can bump up to 2160Hz, and the touch response is actually very good, nothing to complain about. And you've also got a low PWM dimming of 1920Hz. But I saved the best for last, something I've already alluded to. The display on the front is protected by Corning's Gorilla Glass Victus, which I think is a first for this category. Which means that if I do this with the display, I am fairly certain that nothing will happen to it. No, nothing. There's also the in-display fingerprint scanner, which is very fast at unlocking the phone. But here's the fun fact, with the in-display fingerprint scanner, you can also measure your heart rate. I checked it right next to the Apple Watch Ultra, and the results are very close to each other. The haptic feedback on this phone is through the X-axis linear motor, and the haptic feedback implementation has been done well. In fact, it's also spread across the system UI too. So when you're changing the volume, all of that, you get that vibration feedback, which feels very, very nice. But that default emoji keyboard, for some odd reason, has very bad haptics. I don't know why that one specifically doesn't do good haptics. The moment you change to the Google keyboard, the X-axis linear vibration motor is better. Have you guys noticed that? Let me know in the comments below. Now, display is just one part of the multimedia equation, but you do also get stereo speakers with Dolby Atmos support, and the sound quality is actually very, very good. Take a listen to it right next to the Motorola Edge 40 and let me know what you guys think. And for the audiophiles in the house, you get support for high-res, wireless and wired audio. If you're somebody like me who carries a TWS with LHDC or LDAC support, this phone will support it, no problem. Overall, if you are a multimedia enthusiast like me, then this is possibly one of the best phones to consider under rupees 30,000. Also, considering the fact that most of us are generally just scrolling Instagram videos or YouTube shorts or even watching long videos on YouTube, this phone would actually make the cut for one of the best phones under 30,000 for watching videos. Alright, moving on to performance, the Redmi Note 13 Pro Plus has the new Dimensity 7200 Ultra, which is not too different from the Dimensity 7200 preceding it. That apart, you also get three variant options: 8128, 12256, 12512 with LPDDR5 RAM and UFS 3.1 storage, which is pretty good. For what it's worth, inside its body, there's also a 4000mm square vapor cooling chamber. I don't think that's required, but it does help the phone run cool. I'll talk about that. By the way, we did import the Chinese variant of the Redmi Note 13 Pro Plus, and in that, when we checked the Antutu score, it was definitely much higher than what we are getting with this Indian variant, and we ran the test thrice in the performance mode, that too, and yet we couldn't cross the 7.5 lakh mark, let alone reach that 7.8 lakh mark that we got with the Chinese unit. We're continuing to get 7.1 only. And in our CPU throttle test, where we engaged 40 threads for 30 minutes, it didn't throttle too much, and we got a stability score of 84% as well, which is very good. Now, one thing about Xiaomi review phones that we get before launch, the 3D Mark app is gently blocked, so we couldn't run our 3D Mark wireless test that we normally do. Post launch, when the app is unblocked, if we can run it, we'll definitely let you know in a pinned comment on what the final score was. Now, if you are somebody who likes to play a COD, then you can play at ultra frame rates or 90 FPS but at low graphics, and if you want to play at 60 FPS, then you can bump up the graphics to high. So performance wise, the 7200 Ultra on the Redmi Note 13 Pro Plus is definitely a good enough chip for a mid-range phone and a step up from the Redmi Note 12 Pro Plus. But don't expect it to be a performance monster. For example, a phone like the Poco F5 in this price category comes with Snapdragon 7 Plus Gen 2, and it's way more powerful. In fact, I'm predicting that in 2024, we will get many more powerful phones than the Redmi Note 13 Pro Plus under rupees 30,000. Mark my words. Now, as for the network performance, you've got the requisite 5G bands. That's not a problem. You get support for Wi-Fi 6, you get support for Bluetooth 5.3, and you also get support for NFC. Yes, there is NFC on the phone, which is a good thing. The battery inside the phone and the battery charging speeds remain unchanged from the Redmi Note 12 Pro Plus. You get 5000 mAh and 120 watt fast charging, which can charge the phone from 0 to 100 in under 20 minutes. Now, I haven't tested the battery life on this phone because this is just the first impressions video, but from the looks of it, it should give you decent battery life, at least 1.5 days of moderate usage for sure. Now, let's talk about the software, which for me was a bit of a miss. I'll tell you why. Because you do not get HyperOS out of the box. HyperOS with Android 14, I mean. What you do get is MIUI 14 based on Android 13. I sincerely feel that Xiaomi should have launched the phone with HyperOS out of the box, but that's not really the case. But thankfully, the company says that you should be able to get the update by first quarter of 2024. Now, Xiaomi also promises 3 years of software updates on the phone, so you can expect Android 14, 15 and 16, right? See, MIUI 14 is a good software, there is no doubt about that, but there are a lot of bloatware apps, unnecessary apps that are pre-installed, unnecessary games that are pre-installed. Of course, you can uninstall them, but it's not a good experience if you ask me. I prefer a cleaner install than what is provided with MIUI 14. And that apart, the dark patterns still exist. When you first set up the phone, personalized ads is checked by default, and when you try to switch it off, the turn off button is not blue, the turn on button is in blue. Now these are things that make me feel like I would have lived with an IP54 rating, but at least give me a cleaner software experience, please. Anyway, finally moving on to the camera experience. The hardware is not too changed from the Redmi Note 12 Pro Plus. So essentially what you get is the same 200 megapixel Samsung HP3 sensor. You also get an 8 megapixel ultra wide, 2 megapixel macro, and a 16 MP selfie camera on the front. By the way, the primary camera does come with face detection, autofocus, and optical image stabilization as well. That's something that you have to keep in mind. Now the primary camera captures enough details in the pixel bin samples. I have no problem with that. But the HDR performance is kinda average. Also, when you're shooting people, the skin tones are slightly off. They're definitely not the same skin tones as we saw in real life. Portrait mode, on the other hand, is fine with edge detection. There's no problem. You can also capture full 200 megapixel pictures with the phone if you want more details, but do that in daylight. In low light, it's not really effective because it'll be really soft. Low light shots are actually good on the phone. The night mode does enough to control the noise and make the night look attractive, and does keep the colors in check as well. I really like it. Ultra wide 8 MP, on the other hand, whatever pictures I took, they were soft in daylight, and there's no color sense consistency with the primary camera either. Selfies look sharp enough in daylight, and the skin tones are fine too, but the low light selfies are extremely over processed if you ask me. As for the 2 MP macro camera, it's a 2 MP macro camera. No point using it. Now you can also shoot 4K 30 FPS videos with the primary camera. 4K 60 FPS would have been a nice option. And the selfie camera can shoot 1080p 60 FPS videos. And here's what the video quality looks like. You judge and let me know what you guys think.
4K 30 FPS on Redmi Note 13 Pro Plus. And as you can, front camera recording at 1080p 60 FPS.
Apart from this, you do get a few AI-based editing features. One of the AI-based editing features that Xiaomi actually made popular for the very first time was the sky changing feature, and it works really well. It's slightly slow to process, but the kind of sky changes that you can do, the different kinds of sky that you can create, is actually far more detailed than many other operating systems that I've used till now. So that's very well done. Overall, if you ask me the camera experience, I've not tested it in extreme detail, but my first impressions are that the hardware is okay, good enough, but the software tuning needs to be slightly better. So overall, this Redmi Note 13 Pro Plus is definitely a step up from the Redmi Note 12 Pro Plus in terms of the design, the IP68 rating, the display, the performance. In general, it's a better phone, which is obviously going to be the case. It's not going to be a bad phone, but that software experience leaves a sour aftertaste. So what I'm going to be doing is I'll give you a detailed review of this phone after HyperOS update comes about, and by that time I'm sure that there will be many other phones under rupees 30,000 that I can compare to as well. So competition is always good. By the way, I've been conveniently presuming that the Redmi Note 13 Pro Plus is going to be priced under 30,000. Considering the Note 12 Pro Plus's 256GB variant was priced under 30,000, I think that they'll keep the price same with all of the upgrades as well. So the Redmi Note 13 Pro Plus has launched, and the price is rupees 31,999 for the base variant, and you can get 2,000 rupee off on certain bank cards. Now at this price, of course, it's very similar to the price of the Redmi Note 12 Pro Plus, and it is definitely an upgrade over that phone. So you've got a lot of features that are better. Having said that, the price is not as aggressive as we would have hoped it to be. What do you guys think of the pricing? Let me know in the comments below. Until then, keep Trakin and stay safe.